According to Monken, that meeting with Haslam and Barry was contentious. Haslam initially pushed back, worried about the public relations disaster of benching Watson and the financial implications of owing him so much guaranteed money while paying another quarterback to start. But Monken, according to his own account, told Haslam that he didn't care about the optics or the money, that his job is to win football games, and he can't do that with Deshaun Watson as his quarterback. Monken says he told Haslam and Barry that if they're not willing to make this change, he'll resign as head coach because he's not going to waste another year of his career trying to fix something that's unfixable. And apparently that threat worked. According to Monken, Haslam and Barry agreed to support whatever decision Monken makes at quarterback, with the understanding that Monken's job security now depends entirely on whether his alternative plan works. And that brings Monken to the big reveal, the announcement that everyone's been waiting for. Monken says the Cleveland Browns are going to draft Shedeur Sanders with their first-round pick in April, that the three-team trade to move up to third overall is being finalized as he speaks, and that Shedeur Sanders will be the Week 1 starting quarterback for the 2026 season. No competition, no evaluation period, no uncertainty. Shedeur is QB1. The room erupts again, but this time Monken doesn't stop. He keeps talking, explaining his reasoning, defending his decision, and laying out exactly why he believes Shedeur is the answer. Monken talks about spending weeks studying film on every quarterback in this draft class, meeting with Shedeur multiple times, talking to coaches who've worked with him, and even having conversations with Deion Sanders about how he's raised Shedeur to handle pressure and adversity. Monken says that Shedeur has every trait he looks for in a franchise quarterback: elite accuracy.
Haslam, according to sources, tried to defend the Watson decision by pointing out how much money is still guaranteed, how bad it would look publicly to admit failure so quickly, and how difficult it is to move on when you've invested that much in a player. But Monken, according to sources, wasn't having it. He told Haslam that he doesn't care about the optics or the money, that his job is to win football games, and he can't do that with Deshaun Watson as his quarterback. Monken reportedly said, "You gave me this job and told me I'd have authority over football decisions, but every time I've tried to make a decision about the quarterback position, you've blocked me or undermined me or told me to give Deshaun more time. Well, I've given him a year and a half. I've designed offenses around his strengths. I've worked with him on his mechanics. I've tried everything I can think of, and it's not working. It's never going to work. So either you let me move forward with my plan, or you can find someone else to be your head coach, because I'm not wasting another year of my career on this." That threat, the possibility of Monken resigning and going public about organizational dysfunction, apparently got Haslam's attention in a way that nothing else had. According to sources, Haslam asked Monken what his plan was, what he wanted to do if Watson wasn't going to be the quarterback. And that's when Monken laid out the entire strategy that he's been working on for weeks without Haslam's knowledge or approval. Monken told Haslam that the Browns need to finalize the three-team trade with the Giants and Dolphins that moves Cleveland up to third overall in the draft. He said the Browns need to draft Shedeur Sanders with that pick and immediately name him QB1. No competition, no evaluation period, just hand him the starting job and build the entire offense around him. Monken told Haslam that he's already been working with the offensive staff to design a system tailored to Shedeur's strengths, that he's had conversations with Shedeur and Deion Sanders about what it would be like for Shedeur to play in Cleveland, and that Myles Garrett has been recruiting Shedeur behind the scenes and has committed to staying in Cleveland if the Browns make this move. Haslam, according to sources, was stunned by how much Monken had been doing without his knowledge, and that's when the confrontation escalated from a disagreement about football strategy into something much more personal and accusatory. According to sources, Haslam asked Monken why he didn't bring any of this to ownership before taking all these actions, why he was having conversations with draft prospects and their families without permission, and whether Monken understood that what he's describing sounds like tampering that could get the team in trouble with the league. And Monken, according to sources, exploded. He told Haslam that the reason he didn't bring it to ownership first is because ownership has proven over 14 years that they can't be trusted to make good football decisions, that every time Haslam gets involved in football operations, he makes things worse, and that the only way this franchise ever gets fixed is if Haslam stays out of the way and lets football people make football decisions without interference. According to sources, Monken then said something that crossed the line and made the confrontation intensely personal. He told Haslam, "You're the reason this franchise is broken, not the coaches you've fired, not the players who've left, you. Every bad decision this team has made for the past 14 years traces back to you meddling in things you don't understand. You hired me because you thought I'd be someone you could control, but I'm not going to be your puppet. Either give me the authority to actually run this team my way, or fire me right now and find someone else who's willing to be your yes man." That accusation, that direct attack on Haslam's competence and integrity as an owner, should have ended the meeting right there. Most owners would have fired Monken on the spot for speaking that way. But according to sources, something unexpected happened. Haslam didn't fire Monken. He didn't even push back aggressively. Instead, according to sources, Haslam went quiet for almost a full minute, just sitting there processing what Monken had said. And then Haslam asked a question that sources say revealed just how much pressure and criticism has affected him over the years. Haslam reportedly asked Monken, "Do you really think I'm the problem? Do you think if I just stayed completely out of everything, this team would be better?"
And Monken, according to sources, didn't soften his response. He said, "Yes, absolutely. You're a successful businessman in other industries, but football is different. You can't run an NFL team the same way you run an oil and gas company. Players aren't employees who you can just replace if they're not performing. Coaches aren't middle managers who you can fire every 2 years when they don't meet quarterly projections. This is a relationship business built on trust and stability, and you've created an environment where nobody trusts anyone because they know you're going to change your mind or override their decisions or fire them if things don't work out immediately. That's why we can't keep coaches. That's why we can't keep players. That's why Myles Garrett is about to leave, because nobody believes you're capable of staying out of the way long enough to let a real plan actually work." According to sources, that moment was the turning point in the entire conversation. Something about Monken's brutal honesty, the fact that he wasn't trying to save his job or suck up to ownership, actually seemed to resonate with Haslam in a way that years of polite criticism from other people never had. Haslam, according to sources, asked Monken what it would take for him to stay as head coach and feel like he has the authority he needs. And Monken laid out his demands. First, complete authority over the quarterback position with no interference from ownership. Second, permission to finalize the 3-team trade and draft Shedeur Sanders without having to get approval from Haslam for every step of the process. Third, authority to move on from Deshaun Watson however Monken sees fit, whether that's through a settlement, a trade, or even cutting him and eating the dead cap hit. And fourth, a commitment from Haslam that he will not override any of Monken's football decisions for at least 2 full seasons, giving Monken a real chance to build something without constant interference. Haslam, according to sources, didn't hesitate. He told Haslam he was certain that he'd rather get fired for taking a bold risk than survive by playing it safe and mediocre, and that if Shedeur doesn't work out, Monken will accept full responsibility and leave without complaint. And with that, the meeting ended. Monken stood up, shook Haslam's hand, and walked out of the office at 1:30 in the morning. According to sources, as Monken was leaving, Haslam said one more thing that sources say revealed just how much this conversation affected him. Haslam reportedly said, "I hope you're right about this, because I'm tired of being the owner everyone blames for everything. I want to win as much as anyone. I just don't know how." And Monken, according to sources, turned around in the doorway and said, "Then let me show you how. Stay out of my way, and I'll fix this." Within hours of that meeting, word started leaking to reporters that something significant had happened between Monken and Haslam. Nobody had the full details initially, but sources were whispering about a late-night confrontation, raised voices, and a potential resignation that was averted. And then, over the next 24 hours, more details started coming out as people who were briefed on the meeting began talking to trusted reporters.
The story of Monken walking into Haslam's office unannounced, confronting him about organizational dysfunction, threatening to resign and expose organizational dysfunction, and ultimately extracting a promise of non-interference from ownership, it all started spreading through league circles and eventually made its way to the media. And the reaction has been absolutely massive. Some people are calling Monken a hero for standing up to ownership and demanding the authority he needs to actually do his job. Others are calling him reckless and arrogant for thinking he can fix a franchise that's been broken for decades by making one bold draft pick. The Cleveland Browns have not officially commented on the meeting, and according to sources, Haslam has told people in the organization not to discuss what happened. But the actions that have followed in the days since the meeting tell the story. Monken held his explosive press conference where he publicly declared that Deshaun Watson is not QB1 and that Shedeur Sanders will be the starter in 2026. The Browns have accelerated their efforts to finalize the three-team trade and move up to third overall. Settlement negotiations with Deshaun Watson's camp have intensified, and Jimmy Haslam, for the first time in his 14 years as owner, has been conspicuously absent from football decisions. He hasn't issued statements, he hasn't done interviews, he's stayed quiet and let his head coach take the lead. Whether that lasts remains to be seen, but for now at least, it appears that Monken's confrontation achieved what years of criticism from media, fans, and former employees never could. It forced Jimmy Haslam to finally acknowledge that his meddling is destroying the franchise, and to step back and give someone else a chance to fix it. As of right now, February 16, 2026, the Cleveland Browns are moving forward with the boldest plan in franchise history, and it's happening because a first-year head coach had the courage to walk into the owner's office in the middle of the night and tell him the brutal truth about what's wrong with this organization. Whether this plan works, whether Shedeur Sanders becomes the franchise savior that Monken believes he can be, whether Jimmy Haslam can actually stay out of the way long enough to let it happen, all of that remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, the power dynamic in Cleveland has fundamentally shifted. And for the first time in over a decade, it feels like maybe, just maybe, this franchise has a real chance to break the cycle of dysfunction and build something worth believing in.